Hi, today I'm here with Omid Habib. He's the VP of Marketing at Tonic.ai. Before being in marketing, Omid was a software engineer and led software engineering teams, and that gives him a very unique perspective on the industry. So, Omid, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, today, we're going to talk about how marketing delivers campaign and kind of the cycles we go through. And what's kind of interesting is that product teams have started to deliver kind of this continuous delivery cycles, right, with very short cycle of releases. And so being from the engineering world, I'd love to have your perspective on how you kind of apply this concept to marketing and how different it is from the traditional way marketers go about releasing campaigns.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a career pivot. So I started off as a software engineer, and so I learned obviously, best practices with building software. I was in it. I watched trends doing it. I also managed it, and then I pivoted to marketing. So I've been, doing marketing for almost a decade now, and I've noticed that there were a lot of parallels. So one area in particular, which we're going to discuss today, is what I call continuous marketing. So the idea here is that software teams, they used to deploy software, build software, deploy software in a what you would call a waterfall fashion. So the idea is, you build, and then like you have these giant monolithic releases once a year, once every 6 months. And that is now considered a very old way of building software. Now, marketing teams would follow suit by then having what is also considered a waterfall marketing campaign. So you have a once-a-year launch, twice-a-year launch, and the launches were, pretty big. You had to enable, and by the way, my context, just for clarity, comes from enterprise B2B software. This may apply to other industry segments, maybe B2C, and actually, I think it does, and we'll talk about why here in a second. So marketing then would also build these giant marketing campaigns. Now, the way that software is being built today is what we call continuous. So we heard of this term DevOps the last 10 years. DevOps was more of a philosophy, not necessarily tools or software, but the application of DevOps is what we call today CI/CD. A lot of buzzwords. All you have to know is that software features get deployed almost daily. Matter of fact, at Google, I think it was like they have like 100 releases a second, maybe across their entire code base. So the idea is that as soon as the feature is built, you get it out in production into the hands of the customer, right away. So when you open up your app, you open up Netflix, you're like, wow, that's a cool new feature I never noticed before. Or, log on to Facebook, for example, you're seeing updates, continuously. Now, for a marketer, I came from the traditional twice a year, once a quarter approach to product releases. And so as a marketing team, we used to build these big campaigns. And then I joined a company where they were releasing every day. They had a major production push at 5 p.m. And so it was a more continuous release, which is what most companies today are adopting. And if they haven't yet, they're going to get there. So the old way of marketing wasn't working. And I realized, okay, so we can't just like hold off and like talk about our features once a quarter, even like once a month was like too long. So by the time you launch it and release it, the customer's already seen it. Or prospects who are demoing your software, trying your software, they've already seen it. So I introduced what I call continuous marketing. And the idea here is that instead of doing these big monolithic releases, you do small stuff continuously. Now, the question is, well, at what frequency? Because you can't every day have a launch, at 5 p.m. So that depends on the company. For you guys, once a month might make sense. Once a quarter might probably be too long. I've seen some companies, they have a marketing release every week on a Friday. Also, the deliverables on your releases are going to change. So I think a lot of tech companies are guilty of this, where there's kind of a disconnect between what marketing is saying and what the product team is doing inside the actual product UI, what the documentation team is putting together in the product docs, what the sales team is saying to and presenting to prospects. There's this disconnect between the message. And so what I call continuity of message or continuity of experience is that at every point of your, as a consumer, your experience with a brand, the message is consistent, the brand is consistent, and the experience is consistent. I think the gold standard today of that is probably Apple. What you see on TV, super exciting, product looks amazing. You go into a store, the experience matches that expectation. The store experience is, you know, A+. You purchase the product, you come home, you unwrap the product, you actually use the product, you know, you're still up here in terms of the experience. At no point is there a break in disappointment throughout that whole experience. And so there's an alignment, you know, A through Z, end to end. Tech companies are notorious for breaking that alignment. Anyway, I mentioned this because as a marketer, when you do launch, you want to make sure if you're launching continuously, that you have a continuous message. And the way that you do that is you have to have alignment with your docs team, with the product team, product management specifically, software development. So when you're sending out emails to notify your customers and prospects of latest updates, your call to action goes to product docs, which is consistent with what you just communicated. You've enabled your sales team continuously, once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever the case is. Everyone's speaking the same language. Your collateral is being updated, website messaging is being updated. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, so first of all, I love this concept. I think that it makes much more sense to do it this way so that you're totally in line with the product, to your points, right? Like there are really less and less cases that this launch can be like every few months, right? I think something else that I like about the concept is that instead of waiting to have everything ready to communicate about something, maybe you can start with step one. Maybe you can start with piece of communication number one, and then as this is launched, go and like build the rest of what you want to build, right? You don't need the entire package at the very beginning of each campaign.
Yes. So are you asking if when you do launch, do you launch sequentially versus doing everything at once?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of the time you're launching a campaign and you're planning your campaign and you're planning absolutely every piece of the campaign, right? But the truth is your target audience is probably not going to consume everything at the same time anyway. So like, how do you use continuous marketing to make sure that you make progress on your campaign every day instead of like waiting for, you know, the whatever day of the month or the quarter when you launch?
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so I probably answer this question by segmenting based on who's going to consume the information. You know, first and foremost, your customers are going to probably want to know what's happening, right? So a quick email update. I look forward to email updates for my favorite tools. Like, you know, whenever I see an email from Coda.io or like Webflow, I get excited because I'm like, oh, this is awesome. One thing that I also like that they don't do, I'm going to kind of digress from the question here, is that they don't abstract I guess you could call it abstract the theme of the release. In other words, they don't give you like this fluffy theme. They just give you, here are the features. So as soon as you look at the email, you just jump straight to the features and you know exactly what, you know, they built. So going back to your question, I would segment. Now there's all kinds of ways that you can reach your customers. Probably the most powerful way is within the app itself. You log in, you get an immediate pop-up, some tool tips to show you exactly what's new with call to actions in case you need to, you know, go learn more about it. I always click on the learn more, and I love videos. I think Coda is a fantastic example. Webflow, their videos are actually entertaining to watch, but they enable you immediately. So I'm getting, I guess you could call it continuously enabled, and I like that. I like learning something new once a week on my favorite tool. So there's no surprise there. Prospects, people that are, you know, throughout the funnel, mid-stage, you know, in consideration stage, they're going to want to see, you know, that you're constantly updating. It increases my confidence if I'm trying a new software and I constantly see new updates from them. Makes me feel good knowing that, okay, they're continuously improving, building new features, fixing bugs. At the end of the day, software. So you definitely don't want to be using and paying a lot of money, especially if you're in the enterprise where the average deals could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for software. So increases confidence. Maybe not as important, or some would argue equally as important, is going to probably be, like your investors, shareholders, stakeholders. It increases their confidence when they see you're, continuously improving and constantly, building new things. And also, I suppose on that note, the press, they kind of want to see the buzz. You're going to get more attention.
Mhm.
Now, I did get a question. You might be thinking this, like, well, we like to make a lot of noise, and we used to do that, and it would, our launches can't go from like this big thing, to all these, like, small little weekly
Mhm.
launches. What about the press? You can't do a press release once a week, and you can't. Analysts, they don't want to be on a call watching their product, every single Friday for the latest features. So a traditional marketing campaign, we still do this, is we'll package once a quarter. We'll pull from all of the previous releases and kind of package it together into a theme. I recommend it away from, abstract themes to package your releases. But if you wanted to follow that approach, you still can. Traditional releases, big launch campaigns once a quarter, your analyst briefings, press, PR, everything under the sun, you still can
Mhm.
do that. And there's nothing wrong with do that. As a matter of fact, I actually recommend doing that, just so that, it's kind of like a drum beat, right? So it's like dun, 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 right? So
Mhm.
your drum beat is like you're hitting your audience once a week or once a month, but then boom, you hit the market once a quarter, once a week, once a month, boom, hit the market once a quarter. So
Great.
you can still, utilize that approach.
I love it. I think it's really powerful and yeah, just very applicable to, you know, running with the product, right? Instead of living in two very different worlds. So thank you. I mean, I think it was really, really wonderful.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.